The last light of day slipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of dusky pink and deep indigo. The faint hum of cicadas buzzed through the warm evening air. As the neon signs flickered to life, their glow lit up the cracked asphalt outside Elliott's taproom. A dusty pickup truck rumbled into the lot, its headlights cutting across the gravel before parking neatly beside the weathered fence. Terence turned the key in the ignition, cutting the engine and letting the silence settle. He sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, eyes scanning the front of the bar. It wasn't fancy, it never had been, but that was part of its charm. Elliott's was the kind of place that didn't ask questions. No one cared where you came from or why your eyes looked so tired. If you needed a drink and a quiet booth, that was enough. And that was exactly what Terence needed. It had only been a week since he'd returned home, a week since he stepped off the plane with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and months of sand and steel still clinging to his skin. The world looked the same, but something inside him had shifted. It always did after a tour. People thought coming back was the easy part. They didn't understand the quiet war you carried inside you long after the bullets stopped flying. Terence stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching beneath his scuffed sneakers. He ran a hand over his closely cropped hair and exhaled slowly, as if shedding the weight of another long day. The bar's front door creaked on rusty hinges as he pulled it open, releasing a soft wave of country music and the scent of stale beer into the night air. Inside, the taproom was dimly lit, cozy in a way only old places could be. Wooden floors worn smooth by years of boots and bar stools lined with cracked leather told stories without words. A jukebox sat humming in the corner, playing a slow Johnny Cash tune that floated gently through the room. The murmur of conversation rose and fell like a tide, punctuated by the occasional clink of pool balls or a burst of laughter. Terence paused just inside the door, letting his eyes adjust. A few familiar faces dotted the room, regulars who never missed a night, locals who clung to routine like a lifeline. Two men were hunched over the pool table, arguing about the angle of a shot. A trio laughed at the bar, already 3 drinks in, nursing beers and swapping stories. A couple of older folks sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts with a whiskey glass in hand. No one looked up as Terence walked past, and that suited him just fine. He made his way to the back, choosing a corner booth that offered some privacy while still giving him a clear view of the room. Old habits died hard. He slid into the seat and leaned back, letting the shadows cradle him. The fabric of his camouflage uniform caught the low light, blending in almost perfectly with the wood and brick around him. But the sneakers on his feet, worn, comfortable and decidedly non-military, stood out. He didn't care. He flagged down the bartender with a subtle nod. "Just a glass of water," he said, his voice quiet but steady. The bartender, a grizzled man with a salt-streaked beard and kind eyes, gave a brief nod in return and moved to fill his order without comment. No questions. That's what Terence liked about this place. As he waited, Terence let his mind wander. He thought about home, about his mother's cooking, the smell of fried chicken and cornbread wafting through the kitchen, about his little niece, who would no doubt tackle him the moment she saw him, squealing with laughter and wrapping her tiny arms around his legs. He hadn't seen her in over a year. She'd grown, he was sure of it. Kids always did. They moved forward while the rest of the world just tried to catch up. The water arrived with a nod. Terence took a sip and closed his eyes for a moment. Peace. It was fragile, like glass, and right now, it was his. He sat in silence, the soft music wrapping around him like a blanket. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, his mind wasn't racing. He wasn't looking over his shoulder or worrying about who might be watching. He was just here. But peace, like all good things, never lasted. The door burst open with a loud slam that startled several heads toward it. Terence's eyes snapped up instinctively, his body tensing before his mind had time to process. The sound of heavy boots hitting wood echoed through the room like a warning bell. 6 men entered, laughing loudly. They moved with the swagger of people who expected to be noticed. They were older, built thick and heavy with age and experience. Their jackets, worn and patched with insignias and badges, told their own stories. Army, Navy, Marines. They were veterans, or at least claimed to be. The bar knew their type. Loud, proud, and always riding the edge of trouble. Terence didn't react. He simply watched. His eyes followed them for a moment, reading the group like a field report. Who was the leader? Who carried themselves like a fighter? Who watched the others and who just followed? The kind of analysis that had become second nature over the years. He gave them a glance and returned to his water. But one of them didn't let it go. The man at the front, broad, burly, with a thick salt and pepper beard and hard eyes, stopped mid-laugh when he spotted Terence. His gaze lingered, narrowed. He muttered something to the others, too low for Terence to hear, and suddenly their direction shifted. Laughter died, words hushed. All six turned to look. Terence felt it before he saw it, the way the room shifted, the way silence crept in like fog, slowly replacing the easy mood with something heavier. Unease stirred in the air. The bartender glanced up, his eyes flicking between the newcomers and the soldier in the back. Terence didn't acknowledge them. He stared at his glass, his mind focusing on the condensation trickling down its side, but he could feel it. 6 sets of eyes, heavy with suspicion, maybe even contempt. It wasn't the first time he'd been stared at like that. Probably wouldn't be the last. He stayed still, didn't flinch, didn't move. His muscles were calm, but ready, like a loaded spring. The men moved to the bar, but their attention never left him entirely. Every laugh, every muttered comment, every sideways glance, it all orbited around him like he was the unwelcome anomaly in their space. One of them laughed too loudly, clearly forced. Another whispered something and jerked his chin in Terence's direction. The leader didn't even pretend to hide his glare. Terence's eyes drifted toward the jukebox. A new song had started. Something slow, soulful, sad. The kind of song that filled silence instead of breaking it. But even the music couldn't drown out the tension building in the room. He took another sip of water, his hand steady, his face unreadable. At the bar, the group huddled tighter. Their posture shifted. They weren't just drinking anymore. They were planning, watching, testing the mood. One of them muttered, "Doesn't even have boots on," followed by another snicker. "Bet his stripes are stitched on." Terence heard it. Every word, every insult. He'd heard worse from enemies halfway across the world, but it never failed to sting when it came from your own. He didn't move, he didn't speak, but something inside him stirred. Something familiar. Not anger, not fear, readiness, the kind of clarity that came before things broke apart. When time seemed to slow and every detail mattered, the number of exits, the distance between tables, the weight of a glass in your hand. The bartender wiped down a glass with deliberate slowness. He saw it too. Everyone did. They just weren't sure what they were looking at yet. Terence closed his eyes for a brief second, blocking out the room. He hadn't come here to prove anything. He hadn't come here to be challenged. But sometimes the war followed you home. The atmosphere inside the bar had turned. What once was quiet, lazy chatter now sat beneath a thick fog of tension. The jukebox still played softly in the background, but no one was really listening anymore. Glasses clinked less often. Conversations died mid-sentence, and all eyes, whether they admitted it or not, kept sliding toward the back booth. Toward Terence. He hadn't moved. He remained seated in his corner, back straight but relaxed, eyes watching, mind focused. Years of service had carved instincts into him that he couldn't turn off. He'd walked into rooms that were about to explode. He knew this feeling. He'd felt it in foreign lands under foreign skies. He knew when men were readying for trouble, even if they hadn't made the decision consciously yet. The group of 6 hadn't left the bar. If anything, they had settled in deeper. Their drinks arrived, but they didn't drink like men trying to unwind. They sipped like wolves baring teeth, waiting for a reason to pounce. The leader, the burly man with the salt and pepper beard, glanced over his shoulder once more, locking eyes with Terence for just a second. It wasn't a casual look. It was deliberate, meant to challenge, to draw him out. Terence didn't take the bait. He held the gaze without blinking, calm as ever, and then looked away. That only made the man angrier. The table of bikers erupted in laughter again, but it was sharp and dry now. No real joy behind it. Just show. Just noise. Then came the scrape of a stool. The room flinched. Boots thudded against the wooden floor as the 6 men stood and slowly made their way toward the back. The leader walked in front, his broad chest puffed, every step announcing control. The others fanned out behind him like shadows, their movements slower, unsure, but loyal. Terence watched them come. He didn't shift, didn't blink. His glass of water sat half full on the table. His hands rested on either side, calm, still. The noise in the room faded entirely. One of the pool players leaned on his cue and whispered to the other. A woman at the bar subtly moved her purse to her lap. The bartender stopped mid-pour and lowered the bottle he held. No one said anything, but everyone was waiting. The burly man came to a stop just a few feet from Terence's table. He stood there, letting his shadow fall across the booth, letting his presence speak first. His chest rose with a breath, and when he finally opened his mouth, his voice was loud enough for the whole bar to hear. "Nice uniform you got there," he said with a smirk. "Where'd you get it? A Halloween store?" The men behind him chuckled. It wasn't genuine. It was cruel. A laughter meant to provoke. Terence looked up slowly, meeting the man's eyes. His expression was steady, neither angry nor amused. He spoke with quiet clarity. "It's mine. Earned it." That answer hit something. The man's smirk faltered for just a second before returning, harder now, more forced. "Earned it, huh?" he repeated, feigning surprise. "That's funny, 'cause I've seen real soldiers, and none of them wear sneakers with their gear. What's the matter? Boots didn't come with your costume." Another round of laughter followed, louder this time. The bar patrons winced. No one stepped in. Terence's jaw tightened just a touch, but he kept his voice level. "I'm not here to impress anyone, just trying to enjoy a quiet night." The burly man leaned in closer, his breath thick with beer, invading Terence's space. "You don't look like any soldier I ever knew. No boots, no tags. Hell, you probably don't even know how to salute properly." One of the men behind him chimed in, snickering. "Bet he couldn't even tell us the name of his CO. Another added, "Probably got that uniform off eBay." The group laughed again, louder this time, emboldened by each other's ignorance. The sound echoed off the walls. It cut through the low hum of the jukebox like a blade. Terence sat through it. He didn't react. But inside something stirred, not rage, not fear, something deeper. This wasn't just disrespect, it was erasure. It was the kind of insult that tried to scrub clean everything you'd sacrificed, everything you'd given, everything you'd carried back home in silence. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Terence said quietly. That struck a nerve. The leader's smile disappeared. He straightened up, looming taller over the table now, trying to reclaim control. The false friendliness vanished, replaced by something darker. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he asked, his voice lowering to a growl. "Walking in here like you belong? I don't think you do." Silence dropped like a weight. Terence looked him in the eye. There was no hesitation in his voice. "I've served 3 tours overseas. I don't need your approval to belong anywhere." For a beat the air stopped moving. The man blinked. His bravado cracked for half a second, but pride is a powerful thing. He couldn't let it go. "Yeah, prove it," he sneered. "Show us your tags, otherwise you're nothing but a liar." Terence glanced around. The other men weren't so sure anymore. Their posture had shifted, their eyes darted. They were starting to realize they might have gone too far, but they weren't brave enough to pull back. He could have stood. He could have shouted. Instead, he remained seated, calm, controlled. "I don't owe you proof," he said evenly, "and if you think starting something here is a good idea, I suggest you think again." His voice wasn't raised, but it didn't need to be. It carried weight, the kind of weight you earned in silence, not in barked orders. The man's smirk returned, but it was thinner now, stretched tight across his face like paper over flame. "You've got a smart mouth," he said, voice low. "Let's see if it's as quick as your fists." No one in the room moved. The bartender's hand hovered near the phone. A glass somewhere clinked softly on the counter. Then the man moved, fast, but not skilled, not precise. He lunged, hand outstretched, fingers aiming for Terence's collar, to grab, to pull, to dominate. he never made it. Terence moved faster. Years of training surged forward like instinct. In one swift motion, he twisted in his seat, caught the man's wrist mid-air, and yanked it downward, redirecting the force. With a turn and shift of weight, he stood, pivoted, and pinned the man's arm behind his back in a fluid, practiced motion. He drove the man forward, bending him over the table, his cheek pressed to the cool wood. The man let out a cry of pain, loud, shocked, not used to being on the receiving end. The rest of the bikers froze. The bar gasped. Every patron stared, stunned. Terence held the man in place, calm and precise. No anger, no show, just control. "I told you to think twice," he said quietly, close enough that only the man could hear. "You don't know who you're messing with." The leader squirmed, but he couldn't break free. The grip was firm, not cruel, enough to hold, not to harm. One of the others stepped forward, hands up. Hey, let him go. He didn't mean nothing. We were just messing." Terence looked at him. "He came at me. You saw it." The man shrank back. He did see it. Everyone did. The bartender finally spoke up, voice tight. "Maybe it's time for all of you to leave. Now." But the man pinned to the table still had fight in him, or maybe just pride. "Call the cops," he snarled through clenched teeth. "This guy assaulted me. He's impersonating a soldier. Arrest him." Terence released him with controlled force. The man stumbled backward, cradling his arm, humiliated and furious. "You'll pay for this," he shouted. One of his crew pulled out a phone, hands trembling slightly. He punched in the numbers, eyes darting around. "Yeah," he said loudly. "We're at Elliott's Taproom. Guy here's pretending to be a soldier. He just attacked my buddy. We need cops now." Terence stood still, hands at his sides. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He knew what came next. He'd seen it before, how easily the truth could be twisted, how fast a hero could be turned into a villain when the wrong voice shouted first. The bar was murmuring again, whispers trading over glasses and beneath breaths. Some people looked away, others looked directly at him, as if re-evaluating what they'd just witnessed. Terence stayed rooted. His expression was unreadable, but inside, his mind was already moving, running through protocols, remembering names, facts, timelines, preparing. Sirens, distant but growing, pierced the air outside. Red and blue lights painted the walls through the windows. The door swung open, and the law walked in. 2 police officers stepped into the bar, the red and blue lights still flashing outside, throwing long shadows across the wooden floors and booths. The door shut behind them with a quiet finality that seemed to echo louder than the jukebox ever could. Everyone in the room went silent, their heads turning in unison. The tension that had momentarily been paused with the arrival of law enforcement now crystallized into something more anxious, something more uncertain. The first officer was a tall man, broad-shouldered with a cleanly shaven head and mirrored sunglasses still perched on his face despite the dim lighting. His posture was tight, practiced, the kind of stillness that came with years of holding a room. The second was a woman, shorter, with sharp eyes that scanned every corner the moment she stepped through the door. Her expression wasn't cold, but it was unreadable, professional, focused. The man spoke first, his voice steady. "We got a call about an assault and possible impersonation of a soldier." No one answered immediately. Everyone seemed to be waiting for someone else to take the lead, but the silence didn't last. "That's him!" Hank barked, stepping forward with a dramatic flair, holding his wrist like it had been mangled in combat. His face was still red from the pressure Terence had applied, but most of it now came from pride and anger. Hank pointed directly at Terence. "That guy assaulted me and he's pretending to be a soldier. Look at him. Sneakers with a uniform, no tags, no nothing. He faked all of it." The officers turned their attention to Terence. He stood there, still in the same corner he had taken hours earlier, calm, focused, his back straight, arms at his sides. No aggression, no panic. The male officer took a step forward. "Is that true?" Terence met his gaze evenly. "No, sir. I was sitting at my table when he and his friends approached me. They questioned whether I was really a soldier. He attempted to grab me. I defended myself. That's all that happened." The woman stepped in, her voice cool and even. Did anyone witness what happened? The bartender, who had watched the whole thing without moving a muscle since the altercation began, slowly set down the glass he'd been drying. He cleared his throat and nodded. I saw it all, he said. The guy with the beard, Hank, he went after the young man first. The soldier didn't do anything until that man grabbed for him. That's when it all went down. It was self-defense, plain and simple. The officers turned back to Hank. His face twitched, caught off guard by the bartender's words. Yeah, well, he still shouldn't be wearing that uniform, Hank muttered, but there was less fire in his voice now. The female officer turned toward the rest of the room. Did anyone else see the interaction? A few hesitant voices spoke up. A woman near the jukebox raised her hand slightly. Yeah, I saw it. The soldier didn't start anything. Those guys were picking on him for a while before he stood up. Another older man seated by the window nodded. This fella's been nothing but respectful all night. They were trying to provoke him, just didn't like the look of him, that's all. The officers listened carefully. No one sounded uncertain. The crowd, once cautious, was slowly shifting into support. The facts were aligning in Terence's favor. The male officer turned back to him. Do you have any proof of your military service? Terence nodded, slow and composed, as if the question didn't surprise him. Yes, sir. My duffel bag is on the floor next to my table. Inside, you'll find my ID, name tag, service documents, and full uniform with insignias. The officer gestured for the woman to retrieve it. She walked over, crouched down by the bag, and carefully unzipped it. She pulled out the uniform and began inspecting the patches, the rank, the wear on the fabric. Everything about it spoke authenticity, not something pulled off a rack or stitched together for show. She examined the ID next, checking the name and photograph, verifying the details against the service number. When she was done, she walked back to her partner and gave a short, confident nod. The man looked at Terence again. His posture shifted slightly, respect replacing suspicion. You're clear, he said, his voice level but firm. Thank you for your cooperation. Terence nodded. Yes, sir. But the peace didn't last. Hank stepped forward again, his voice raised now in frustration rather than confidence. That's it? You're just going to take his word for it? How do you know he didn't fake that stuff? People forge papers all the time. The female officer turned to him with a hard stare. Enough! Hank opened his mouth again, but she didn't give him the chance to finish. From what we've heard, you instigated the situation. You approached him, insulted him, then physically engaged first. And yet he's not pressing charges. You're lucky. If he did, we'd be taking you in for assault right now. Hank froze. The words hit him with more force than Terence's grip ever had. The other bikers around him shifted uncomfortably. Their tough posturing began to fall away. No one was laughing anymore. No one was even making eye contact. The male officer stepped in. Here's how this is going to go. We'll be filing a report on the incident tonight. You're welcome to pursue any accusations if you choose, but I advise you consider your next steps carefully. False reporting is a crime. Hank clenched his jaw. He looked around the room, hoping someone would back him up. No one did. The woman officer returned Terence's bag and gave him a nod of appreciation. Thank you for staying calm. We'll make sure this is documented properly. Terence nodded in return, his voice soft but clear. I appreciate that, ma'am. The officers made a few more notes, exchanged final glances with the bartender, and then headed toward the door. Their job was done. The bar would return to its usual rhythm. The bikers were the first to move. One by one they shuffled out, awkward and silent. Their leader, Hank, glared at Terence one last time, his pride still aching, but his confidence shattered. No more insults, no more performance, just retreat. The bar door closed behind them, and slowly the tension began to drain from the room. The jukebox kicked back in with a new song, low and bluesy. Someone whispered a joke. A quiet laugh followed. The bartender poured a beer for a regular like nothing had happened. But something had. Terence sat back down, the same way he'd started the night, glass of water still waiting, his expression unchanged, though something behind his eyes had deepened. The weight of the incident still hung in his chest, not because of fear, but because of the reminder. The reminder that no matter how many years he gave, no matter how many missions he completed, some people would still look at him and see only what they chose to see. Not the soldier, not the sacrifice, just their own bias reflected back at them. People avoided his gaze at first. Then, slowly, they began to look. Not with the same suspicion, but with something else. Respect, admiration, even guilt. A man in his 50s gave him a nod from across the room. A younger woman mouthed the words, "Thank you," and returned to her drink. Small gestures, but they mattered. Days passed. Terence returned to his routines. He fixed things around the house, reconnected with family, took quiet walks in the early evening, tried to settle back into civilian life. But the memory of that night never quite faded, not the confrontation itself, but what it represented. Then, one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, the sound of tires crunching gravel drew his attention from under the hood of his truck. He straightened slowly, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. A motorcycle rolled into the driveway. Terence squinted into the light, watching as the rider pulled off his helmet. It was one of the bikers, not Hank. The wiry one with thinning hair and a jacket that hung too big on his frame. Bill, if he remembered right. The man hesitated before stepping off the bike. His posture wasn't aggressive, no arrogance. He looked almost sheepish. He walked a few paces toward the truck, then stopped. "Terence, right?" Terence didn't answer immediately. He just watched him, eyes unreadable. I wanted to come by," Bill said, clearing his throat awkwardly. "To apologize." Terence raised an eyebrow. He didn't move. Bill shifted his weight. "I know I didn't say anything that night, but I was part of it. I didn't stop it, and I should have." Terence leaned against the truck, his arms crossed, but his expression didn't harden. "Why now?" he asked, voice even. Bill looked down at his boots. "Because I've been thinking about it every day since, and because, I guess it just hit me. The way you handled yourself, calm, professional, strong. It made me realize how wrong we were. You didn't deserve that." He paused, then looked back up. His eyes, though small, were honest. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, "but I needed to say it." Terence was quiet. The engine beside him ticked softly as it cooled. A breeze rustled the leaves. Finally, he spoke. "I've heard a lot of words before, some genuine, some not." Bill nodded, as if expecting that. "But it took something for you to show up here," Terence added. "That means something." Bill exhaled, visibly relieved. "Thank you, man, really." He turned, mounted his bike again, and started the engine. Terence watched him ride off, the dust kicking up behind him as the bike disappeared down the rural road. He stood there for a while longer, rag in hand, staring at the horizon. It hadn't been a perfect ending, but maybe it was a start. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.